Hi, I'm Olivia from Urban, and I'm joined by Dean Landy, who's one of the partners at ClarkeHopkinsClarke and author of the book Creating Vibrant Communities. Dean, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Olivia. It's great to be with you.
So I thought we'd discuss the future of employment hubs within our neighbourhoods. And given your extensive experience in this area, Dean, would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about what an employment hub is and the benefits it provides a community?
Yeah, sure. This is I guess, the major area of my work in particular now. And although we've thrown around that phrase of employment hub, to me, it's pretty much a return to mixed use communities. So the fundamental shift, and I guess the holy grail of urban planning, is to be able to get employment into more localised centres. So to do that, we've just learned from our experience over the years and a lot of research in that we know that you can't just, and we don't just want to create 80s business parks, so to speak. We want to create really appealing, livable, mixed-use centres which have a major focus and are underpinned by employment. So, like I say, we've learned from our research around the world that you can't separate those two. We need to find a way to be able to bring those elements of livability and employment together, and they actually feed each other hand in hand.
Absolutely. So which ClarkeHopkinsClarke developments would you consider to be an employment hub, and what aspects of those projects are you most proud of?
Well, there's a good number of projects we're working on at the moment that are, as they do, take a little while to come through the pipeline. And we tend to work at a varying mix of levels and scales. And when I say that, I mean from what we define as a small urban village through to pretty major projects, which will be, as they use the phrase, nation building projects in Australia, which we're working towards for new cities, and then everything in between that spectrum. So when I use some case studies within that band, we like to use a project which we're just completed recently out in Point Cook, which is known as Tribeca Village. And what that shows me is there's a really strong appetite for not just employment where we think office building type employment, but a mix of different community and commercial type uses within a small neighbourhood village. So that can be everything from community services to personal trainers through to childcare centres, swim centres, and the space for small office, home business, and so on. And the next step up from that, we're just soon to start construction of another project known as St Germain. This is in Melbourne's outer southeast and around Berwick Way. And what's really exciting about that project is that goes to that next level where the developers are not only aspiring to set a vision, which we hear a lot about, live, work, learn, play, but are actually doing it. So in the first stages, there's a significant commitment to a major health precinct, new office buildings, apartments in a build to rent model, and the retail piece. And then that supports the greater diversity. And then at the upper end of the spectrum, as I mentioned before, is a new city building initiative, which is, long story short, new urban development, rebalancing the Australian population, enabled by high-speed rail, the northern parts of Victoria.
Wow, it seems like you've got some fantastic projects underway. So is it true that the developer of your project, St Germain, is actually a local family who had a vision of how they wanted their neighbourhood to progress in future and took the project into their own hands and actually developed it themselves?
It is, and what I love doing is working with clients that can see the bigger picture, I guess, and the different pieces of the puzzle that need to come together to create not only a good quality place and an amazing place for future generations to live in, but clients that see their role as town founders effectively and the legacy that their development and their family and their business can have. So that particular group was initiated by a man called Gordon Gill, who owned farmland out there for many years and just had a real passion to do urban development differently. And some of the nuances of the master plan that we've been able to work through with the family over the years. Unfortunately, Gordon passed away before he will get to see the finished product, but that highlights even more so why that legacy piece can then roll on. And it's little things like tweaking the urban planning to ensure the retirement and seniors living elements are brought right up into the core of the town centre so that they're integrated. Because we know from experience that true vibrant town centres aren't just a single use and aren't just a single demographic of people. We need the broad cross-section of age brackets and socioeconomic mixes. And to do that, we know that things like retirement living, for example, the residents in those spaces are generally the highest proportion by percentage of residents that will be most actively walking in an activity centre during the day.
How do you find the best ratio between commercial space and residential dwellings within your mixed-use precincts?
What's interesting is that we are trying to provide some sort of science to it, if you like, or some quantifiable metric that we can all at least relate to and understand. And if I answer that question quickly, it's sort of around that 40 to 50 dwellings per hectare we find is a good balance for medium density type product. If we start to introduce some apartments, we can start to push up to 70 or so dwellings per hectare. And that's from our research, but also leading academics like Billy Giles Corti at RMIT University. But what I find interesting and what I love is that, or I almost find humorous, is that there's always this discussion around new urbanism or what is the right mix or how do we do it. Essentially, we only need to look back to predominantly the pre-war neighbourhoods and settlements that we all actually love and find most desirable. Think of Yarraville or Collingwood or Richmond in Melbourne. Think Surrey Hills in Sydney. And if you take a step back and look what makes those places so appealing and desirable, it's pretty simple. They were mixed use. We've got a term for it now, but before it used to just be business as usual. So being able to blend all of those elements together, some great, even basic principles of great street trees and great streets and squares and places is what makes it appealing. But it's a coming together in a slightly eclectic mix. We don't need to overthink it. We've for too often compartmentalised things of office employment goes there, housing goes there, retail goes there.
So given the significant job losses, unfortunately, as a result of COVID-19, are you looking to fast track any developments which could provide a substantial amount of employment opportunities once they're complete?
A couple of projects we're working on now. One I mentioned before was Clara, which is the high-speed rail project, which we would love to see accelerated. We're working through another major town centre in Melbourne's outer west in Rockbank, and that has a similar vision to be able to create a mixed-use city centre which fundamentally at its core supports an entrepreneurial spirit to see startups transition into grow up, these bigger businesses that can expand in a mixed-use urban setting. Now, the things that need to accelerate, to answer your question, are things like build-to-rent models, which will help us unlock new housing opportunities in these urban settings. It means we don't have to wait for pre-sales. It means we can get better housing options and affordability for key workers through to knowledge-based workers that are coming into these settings, because we want to reduce the commute time. So if we can see that, and I know there's so many challenges around the tax implications and so on, but that is the problem that we need to overcome. Now is the time to address that.
How do you see the future of traditional workplaces evolving, given the rise of people working from home or remotely during the lockdown?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've been asked that quite a bit lately. And I think, none of us have the crystal ball, but I think there will be a balancing, of course, once everyone gets over the work from home scenario. And I think the novelty probably has worn off for many people, especially if you've got small kids and challenging spaces. But the thing that I think will shift is a transition more towards co-working and I guess a hub and spoke approach for many businesses that can do it. Not everyone can do that. And then that way we can see the enablement of people being able to stay local, and through the change in the work environment, we'll embrace and support that. But I've said for many years that when we talk about things like affordability, it can't be decoupled from livability. Affordability, as an example, it may sound like a tangent, but it all ties together. Too often affordability has been a discussion on release more land so we can build cheaper houses, and that's where the affordable stuff goes. But it's not just that. We need to create livable places that are appealing, that people want to live there by choice. And of course, a major piece of that is employment. and to get the employers, the system, the ecosystem needs to be around amenities. If we can provide great amenity, more affordable housing in diverse, mixed-use, walkable places, they're healthier, happier places to live. And I think the pandemic has only reinforced that outcome.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dean, and for sharing your insights on employment hubs with us.
Great. It was, I love talking about these sorts of topics and love to see this gradual change.
So for more information on ClarkeHopkinsClarke's current and future projects, then head to urban.com.au. And if you'd like to see more interviews with industry experts, then subscribe to our YouTube channel.